Yeah, yeah, yeah. Paminagaw, paminagaw. Kadumakun manubo. Paminagaw, paminagaw. Kaduman kun manubo. Kanta nagsuman-sumanan katotoo. Nasugilanon. Dongan no panahon. Maroyo pagpo. To kabuyag-yagan. Diyo to patag. Apantik aagaw. Langyaw matnako. Doon kasabot din no. Ano nang Pilipino. Ipansol pigtonos. Diyo to hilit. To kapulpu walasan. Paminagaw, paminagaw. Kaduman kun manubo. Kanta nagsuman-sumanan katotoo. Nasugilanon. Kantan naman. Pigdaog-daog. Bayaran kit kalsada. Way salapi. Kay doon katuyuan kanta. Paminagaw, paminagaw. Kaduman kun manubo. Kanta nagsuman-sumanan katotoo. Nasugilanon.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you guys for coming out. We really appreciate you guys taking your time out of your Friday night. I know you guys had a really long week. I've had a pretty long week. But my name is Corleone. I represent the Kapit BC Kabataan Network and Anik Bayan Long Beach. I also got to go on the trip to the Philippines last summer 2014, with the Kapit BC Network, which was a network of university-level students and students from the United States who got an opportunity to help fundraise and bring relief efforts to the Philippines, and it was a really awesome experience to be a part of the Kapit BC Kabataan Network. We also had the opportunity to visit the Talaingod region of the Philippines and really get to experience and understand some of the struggles and strives of the Luma people in Talaingod.
Hi, how's everybody doing tonight? Good. My name is Jay, and I'm part of Anak Bayan Long Beach, and I also went on the Kapit Bisig Kabataan Network mission to the Visayas region with Corleone this past summer. And part of that Kapit Bisig Kabataan Network mission also incorporated a mission to the Mindanao Islands of the Philippines, which was the Talaingod indigenous community. And that was part of the Panaghiusa, which, how many of the folks in this room are part of Panaghiusa or have heard of it before? Woo, that's like a good half of the room. So thanks folks for coming out. So Panaghiusa is a network based here in Southern California that is basically formed around fighting for human rights and justice and peace in Mindanao in the Philippines. And so it comprises of organizations like Anak Bayan Long Beach, as well as church people, particularly Rosewood United Methodist Church, and other professionals, doctors, nurses. And every year, folks have been going to the same community in Talaingod to provide medical services, but also to learn about like the conditions that the indigenous communities are facing there, and how we here in the U.S. can really support their efforts against militarization and human rights violations, and basically their right to defend their ancestral land. And so me and Cor went as part of that delegation, and now I'm going to pass the mic to Johnny.
What's up, y'all? My name is Johnny. I'm from Anak Bayan Long Beach. So every year, Anak Bayan sends their members to the Philippines to learn about what kind of things folks are facing in the homeland, right? So I went recently. I just got back in January. I spent Christmas and New Year's Eve there in the Philippines, in Talaingod. And I got to integrate with indigenous communities out there and learn from them firsthand, like what are they facing. So basically, I ate what they ate. I went to sleep when they went to sleep. Just had to learn what their life was like under the current conditions. So I'll be sharing with you a little bit about what I saw while I was there later on in the program.
And hi everyone, my name is Hias. I am from Hobby Arts, a progressive Filipino cultural workers organization here in LA. And I went very recently to the Philippines from December to the end of February, so about 3 months. And I was doing a collaborative documentary video project with the Talaingod Manobos. So I wanted to document how they are building these schools for their own needs. So it's a very pro-people concept of school that I really wanted to see, and I wanted to show people what's going on there. So I'll show bits and pieces of what we all learned there. So yeah.
So while we thank you guys for all coming, we'd also like to thank our host, the Harriet Tubman Center for Social Justice, for hosting us this evening. They're also home to the Workers' World Party and the International Action Center. Also, we just have to take care of some logistical things, just in case. Bathrooms, if you guys need to use the restroom, there's no bathroom over here. There's actually a bathroom behind the projector screen. And in case there's a fire, which I don't know why there would be, there are exits in the back over here, and there's also an exit back here. We keep it locked, but we will unlock it just in case we need to. So if you guys, just in case. And also, I can see that you guys have already helped yourself to the food. Thank you for everybody who brought food and helped make this night happen. It really took a lot of work, and we appreciate everybody for giving their input. So food is in the back, and also I believe we have some photographers and stuff here, so we'd like everybody for volunteering as well. And for that, I would like to pass it on to Hias.
Oh, so before we start, I wanted to teach everyone something. So everyone knows what isang bagsak. Do people know isang bagsak? Can people raise their hands if they know isang bagsak? Well, I'm not gonna teach you that, because the Manobos have something else. So they have something called pangiyak, which basically means like make some noise, kind of. So whenever I say pangiyak, everyone does like a short like woo, like really quickly. So can we try it? Johnny will lead the response. So pangiyak. Oh, you need to do it louder than that. Pangiyak. Pangiyak. All right, let's start.
Endless curves of emerald mountain peaks, sounds of laughter running through tall, lush trees, while wildlife runs free. Where rivers and slippery toes meet rocks, reflections of lumad faces greet the sunlight, fresh stream water swimming with life, unity of the people and land, disrupted by monopoly and greed. Up the PowerPoint there. Back one more slide. Oh, is that the right first one? Okay. Hi. So I'm just going to give a little bit of context as far as what part of Mindanao we were in, just so you know what are sort of the conditions that community that we visited was facing. So next slide, please. So just to give context before, like I said earlier, Corleone and I went as part of a international solidarity mission that happened this past July and August in 2014. It was part of a larger international affair called the North America Philippines Solidarity Affair for Ecological Justice and Human Rights. So there were over, I want to say about 100 representing individuals, part of human rights organizations, indigenous rights peoples organizations, church people who were present to really uncover what is going on in the islands of Mindanao, what is going on in the indigenous communities and the peasant communities and the far-flung, really rural communities, and to come together as people here in North America and the United States and also in the Philippines to really work together to promote genuine solidarity as far as how can we address human rights issues going on in those communities, how can we address the rampant land grabbing and the many issues that those communities are facing. And so we did get to see directly firsthand, and this was done through various social services that we are providing. So a lot of folks that are part of the Panaghiusa network are also doctors and nurses, and so we provided a lot of medical services to these communities that we visited. Also, we provided psychosocial intervention with the Father Pops Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization in Mindanao, who does many of these mission trips several times of the year in these areas, because many of the children are experiencing extreme trauma from the super typhoons as well as increased militarization operations in their communities, and so they need a lot of attention. And so Father Pops was the one that was really leading those psychosocial interventions. And then of course too, we participated in their daily lives. We farmed with them, we ate with them, and we also got to really hear from them what is the struggles that they are facing through various sharings. One more back, sorry. So I just want to shout out the organizations that sponsored us and also are participating. So from the United States is the Kapipisi Kabatan Network, which is youth and students that formed after Typhoon Haiyan for genuine relief and rehabilitation. And then Panaghiusa here in Los Angeles, like I mentioned earlier. BASA Southern Mindanao was a huge sponsor of our trip, coordinating. They're a grassroots, a nonprofit organization in Mindanao who does efforts around disaster preparedness and typhoon relief. And then Rural Missionaries of the Philippines, they also help establish schools in indigenous communities in Mindanao. And then again, Father Pop's Foundation. So those are the great organizations that kind of helped put this mission together and also helped guide us when we were in the region. So where were we? So on the map, there's Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. We were in Mindanao for this portion of our mission, and we were in Davao del Norte. And then within Davao del Norte, there is a small little town called Talaingod. Next slide. And we were staying, me and Corleone were staying in Sitio Nasilaban, forgive me if I butchered that, in a community called Palmagil. And this is, of course, in a very mountainous region, very far flung out from the city. As you can see, that was kind of the view from where we were sleeping in the outdoor area. This is actually part of a mountain range in Mindanao called the Pantaran Range. And it's a large, massive mountain region. It covers about 12% of the entire Mindanao Islands, cutting across several different provinces. And this is currently being under attack by a lot of mining and logging corporations, multinational corporations. And where we were staying in Talaingod is home to the Atamanobo tribe. Next slide. So how did we get there? This is my favorite part. Not. Some of y'all get what I mean by that. So it's a 2.5-hour bus ride from Davao City, which is the main city urban center in Mindanao. From there, it's another 2.5-hour motorcycle ride. And in the Mindanao region, the motorcycles are called habal. And basically, it's just like a motorbike. It's not even like a Harley or anything. It runs on like a small little thing of vegetable oil, I don't know. And you have the driver, and he seats maybe up to 3 skinny people, otherwise maybe 2, and to even out the motorcycle, sometimes folks sit in the front. I sat in the front, not very lucky, fell off several times. And sometimes the weight of the motorcycle doesn't balance very well, and especially in the terrain, right? There's no roads going up to these mountainous rural communities. There's no roads, let's just be real, there's no roads, and when it's raining season, it turns into mud like that, and there's also like massive boulders that the motorcycle can't get up to, and so we also had to walk. So it was a strenuous 2.5-hour walk getting up there, as well as that motorcycle ride, and going up like mountain peaks and what have you. Part of the ride was really the experience too, is just really understanding like how far off these communities are and how little access they have to roads, to social services like healthcare and education, the way that the Philippine government is really neglecting that large population of people in these areas. So next slide. So this is when we arrive. This is the village, again, kind of overlooking the home to this barangay, and again, the Atamanobo tribe resides here. Next slide. So who are the indigenous Atamanobo? So they are the Lumad people. So Lumad in Cebuano or Bisaya dialect means native or indigenous. And the Atamanobo tribe, they speak Atamanobo. They traditionally are under the leadership of, they're very communal, but they're under a kind of like a leadership of like a chief that they call a datu. And they're traditionally a hunting and food gathering tribe. people. But of course, this is being under attack because of the changes in their land. And land is life to them. Their ancestral land and their ancestral domain is communal land, and it's their relationship to the rivers and the forest and basically the mountain is the way that they survive and how they eat. So just giving some backing again to some more context to what Mindanao is like in general. It's not just like a vacuum to the community that we visited, but it's actually a prominent issue within that island, but also all throughout the Philippines. Mindanao in particular is one of the richest islands in natural resources. It consists of lots of deposits of gold, copper, silver, nickel. There's lots of fishing and lumber that is in the area, and a lot of agricultural production is based out of Mindanao. So a lot of banana and pineapple plantations are actually all based in Mindanao, especially Del Monte and Dole, that you might be familiar with, multinational corporation. And Mindanao is also home to a large Muslim or Moro population who have historically been marginalized since the days of the Spanish colonialism, and to this day are still oppressed and not, their rights are not met by the Philippine government. And just to name off a couple indigenous tribes in the Mindanao region, I don't want to butcher the names, but there they are. And of course, Manobo is one of the more prominent tribes in the area that we were able to integrate with. And again, a very agricultural region. Many of agricultural products that are exported abroad come from Mindanao and is likely what we are also consuming and feeding the world. And it's also home to several multinational mining firms. Those are just a few to name. Many of them are Canadian, as well as US-based multinational mining corporations. What issue that many folks in Mindanao are facing, particularly in Talengod, in the early 1990s, there was an effort to do large-scale logging and deforestation of the communities in Mindanao, and Johnny will speak a little bit more about that later, as far as what did the people of Talengod do to really resist that and prevent that from happening, because it was really a people-led effort that really blocked that from happening. And then also to the Mining Act of 1995, passed by the Philippine government. And essentially what this act does is that it allows open, free access for multinational corporations to take advantage and have ownership of all the land in Mindanao, including land, all its minerals, natural resources, water, etc. And all of that is historically been where the indigenous people have been living for thousands of years. So it is also displacing those folks. And just to give you some context as far as the Mining Act, just last year, I believe, about 700 mining applications have been approved by President Aquino, and about 55, a little bit more over half of those applications are in territories or land that is home to indigenous peoples in the Philippines. And of course, this Mining Act or these efforts of mining is really not benefiting the people that are living there, especially the indigenous people. It's really geared towards multinational foreign benefit, extraction of natural resources for the benefit of profit, and it's not really providing any means of agricultural mechanization or national development for the people living there. So what are the effects that it has on the indigenous people in Mindanao? So land grabbing not only pushes indigenous Manobo off their land, but it affects their entire mode of production, how they are basically creating food and livelihood, and their entire systems of life. So folks will share a little bit more about how specifically this has impacted folks, but just to share in a little general overview. So because they've been pushed off their land, they've now gone from a hunting and gathering society to more of a farming society, and they're not met with the proper tools or resources in doing that. So there's a lot of development and adapting that they have to do, that they shared with us, the Manobo shared with us, that is very challenging. A lot of their sources of food, animal life ran away because there's no more trees, there's no more mountain ranges, and so they have nothing to hunt anymore, which really influences their ability to eat, the Manobo people. And then that leads to shift in family and gender dynamics as well. So a lot of the women were telling us that before these corporations were coming in and pushing them off their land, the men would hunt and the women would gather food, but now that they have shifted into sort of a farming society, the women are also forced to farm, and on top of that, they have to take care of their children, they have to, cook for their husband and their family, and so it's a lot of things that they have to juggle and adjust. They shared was very difficult. And I also thought this was very crucial, is that indigenous herbal practices and medicines come from the trees and the plants that exist within the Pantara mountain range, and all of that is being basically destroyed. And so what access to these folks have to medical services if their indigenous practices are being taken from them, and the government too is not even providing Western, quote unquote, Western medicine. I'm gonna speed it up, sorry I'm running out of time. But there is a people struggle and a resistance happening all throughout Mindanao and of course the Philippine country. The Muslim people have traditionally in Mindanao been marginalized and oppressed, and so there are armed forces, armed groups, Muslim groups that are rebelling and demanding their own form of self-determined and sovereign government within those spaces, within that region. There's also presence of the New People's Army, which is the army of the Communist Party of the Philippines, who has long been part of many years since the late 1960s, a civil war with the government of the Philippines. Also calling for, for farmers to have land and for workers to have genuine jobs, access to jobs. And then there's PASACA, which is a regional indigenous peoples organization who are fighting against these very acts of mining and logging in their homes and communities. And then the Salupongan Tatanu Ikanu Gon, which is indigenous people united to defend their ancestral land. This was formed in the early 1990s as well. Basically all the indigenous people in the region came together and said, hey, let's stop fighting each other, let's unite together to fight the mining corporations that are taking our land. And so Johnny will share a little bit more about that as well. And so there's a long history of resistance against exploitation and repression in all forms from many different groups in Mindanao and in the Philippines. And this is in response, it doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? It's in response to 30 plus years of logging and mining under Spanish colonialism, under the US, under Japanese. The Philippine government is failing to provide basic social services in these areas. And on top of that, when people do resist and they do demand change, they're being met with human rights violations and increased militarization in their communities. So, next slide. So this will come up again later, but just giving you an overview of the community that we visited, a major problem that they faced. Okay, I've got 1 minute. Major problem that they faced was militarization of their schools, homes, and communities. And this is under the larger context of President Aquino's Oplan Bayanihan, which is a counterinsurgency program that he declared in an effort to basically tag anybody who's critical of his policies, who's fighting for the genuine rights of people to have access to education and jobs and land and life, are being red-baited as members of the New People's Army, and as such they're even going as far as like kidnapping and murdering innocent civilians, human rights activists, lawyers, church people have been disappeared, and many of these also include Manobos as well, who have simply been resisting the logging and mining in their communities, and they have lost many of their community members because of the ongoing militarization. The President Aquino is sending armed forces of the Philippines troops to these communities in an effort to really suppress resistance. So we saw a lot of military checkpoints on our motorcycle rides up and down, where they will search our bags, and these come unannounced. You don't know when they'll happen or where they'll happen. And many of the students shared that they were harassed on their way to school. They would be beat by soldiers. They would be, their bags would also get searched, and they'd be accused of being rebels when all they wanted was to walk to school and go to school. And communities have even been bombed. There's been several evacuations in these communities because of militarization happening in schools. One of the Salakpungan schools, indigenous schools, last year, the 8th graders couldn't even do their graduation because the military was occupying their school. And they've also burned entire schools and crops as well, claiming that these are rebel schools and rebel farms and that people don't deserve to eat and have education because they're supporting this or whatever. So, and I just wanted to end my piece here is that President Aquino actually blatantly, unashamedly said that the armed forces of the Philippines exist as investment defense forces. Ugh. Like, that basically says that he doesn't stand with the people, that he's placing military and having them occupy in communities and schools and homes because he wants to protect the interests of these mining and logging multinational corporations that are obviously have a big interest in Mindanao and in these indigenous communities because of the natural resources in the land. And we'll even go to the great length of violating a child and a student's right to their education and to life, to really basically protect the interests of profit and multinational corporations. Okay, thank you.
It is written on their faces, the anguish and fear. Yet they strive. Yet they still sing, and their voices are loud, proud, and united they are fearless, under constant threat and constant attack. Their voices are silent whispers of the wind, sleepless. They stand together. They are the watchful eye, and in numbers, they are heard.
So Jay talked earlier about the different things that are happening in the Philippines. I would like to talk about some of the conditions and things that the people of the Philippines in the Talaingod regions are facing. The land grabbing that is happening in the Philippines is having a direct impact on the communities of the Atap Manobo. The indigenous people of the Philippines are being pushed out of their communities by the Philippine National Police and the armed forces of the Philippines that protect and benefit multinational corporations looking to their ancestral lands for natural resources. And I was a part of a group that went to the Philippines in the summer of 2014 to help bring context to some of the conditions of the people out there. You know, it's one thing to hear about, you know, from someone about the conditions of the people, and it's another thing to see it firsthand. The women in the community expressed how hard it was to have to switch their entire lifestyles from a hunter-gatherer society due to mining and logging corporations invading the land and scaring off all the animals that they used to rely on for food, and forced to become an agriculturally based society. And when we were in the community, they were still having a hard time adjusting. And as some of you know who went on the trip with us, we actually saw how hard it was for them to adapt, and it was really difficult for me to see. As Jay mentioned earlier, the travel to Talaingod was a long journey, and to reach the community, we had to travel almost 2 hours up a mountain by motorcycle, and that was actually a really interesting experience. And to reach certain communities, it was also another 1.5 hours to trek by foot. And when we were there, we had to walk to Lasacan, which was this community outside of Nasilaban. So once we got off the motorcycles, we ended up in Nasilaban, where we were helping and were part of some of the communities who were out there providing some medical relief and really just integrating with the community. And then a medical team was sent up to Lasacan, and I and another person from the US delegation were able to travel to Lasacan and really be a part of that. And we learned about how difficult and dangerous it was to walk up the side of a mountain, and many of the youth make the travel between the communities like Lasacan and Lasilaban to get to school every morning. The students have a routine to wake up early and take the 1.5-hour trek, and it shows the determination and importance that the youth see in their education that they are being provided by the Salakpungan schools. When we were up there, we noticed how much work it was for these young people to have to travel to school every day, and unfortunately, there are not enough schools to provide for the youth in the community. I had the opportunity to provide some short-term medical support to community members in the Talaungad region, but when I began doing the work, I quickly realized that the people, and specifically the youth and community, lacked basic support and immunities to diseases that are very treatable, such as prolonged fevers and colds. And community members are uneducated, and we were able to help train community health workers in the community with the medical team to respond to these diseases and provide short-term relief and medical supplies to the community members. But the neglect of the government has really shown in these regions that are often turned under the tide to fend for themselves and rely on the support of community-based organizations that travel there every so often, but not in time to provide resources that they need. But it proved difficult to get these needed funding and resources when the only support that these communities have and get is from community organizations. And it really shows that the Aquino administration has neglected the indigenous communities, and the youth are shown to be malnourished. And when interviewing teachers in the Salakpungan schools, they expressed concerns on how malnourished the children were. And it shows that the smarter students or better prepared students for school were more nourished, and the disparity there was clear. So those who were fed better tended to do better in school, and those who were much more malnourished tended to forget a lot of what they were learning in the schools. Still, however, the schools are also very under-resourced, and there are several campaigns that are fighting to bring funds to these schools that are being run from here in solidarity with the United States right now, but it isn't enough to have community support. Accountability also must be pressured on the government to protect these communities, and it is clear the Aquino administration has no interest in doing any of that. A direct result of the militarization and the movement of troops to occupy these communities and the Atamanobos have had to flee their communities to escape it. And when I was in the communities, we had an activity where we were able to integrate with the students, and had an activity where they got to draw and describe what were some of their strengths and what were some of their fears. Many of the students highlighted that some of their strengths were the schools, and the military and armed conflict happening were some of their fears. And it just really shows how devastating this militarization has had on these students. Many students were also confused about who were trying to harm their communities and who were trying to protect their communities. But in general, all military or armed forces must stay a certain vicinity away from the communities. And we heard about how many of these communities were being violated of their rights and their land as military continued and continues to occupy their land and harass their community. The abrupt violation has directly disrupted their livelihoods, created fear among the community, and even disrupted their access to education in the Salakpungan schools. I was also able to have an opportunity to sit with a lot of the Datus in the communities and have a very rare conversation with them and hear about the stories of the organizing by the IP communities. The armed conflict happening between the AFP and the NPA has really taken a toll on the community, and as one Datu explained to me, the Datus discussed how they were tired of being harassed and being forced to flee their communities, that they formed their own organization to resist the militarization of their communities, and are oftentimes targeted by the armed forces of the Philippines and ragtag as members of the NPA or New People's Army. The government implemented a counterinsurgency program called Oplan Bayanihan that targets community members who organize and fight for their right to live by repressing and systematically ordering extrajudicial killings of anyone who questions the failure and neglect of the Aquino and Philippine government. They were agitated by government repression, and the resistance to militarization was just as empowering as it was emotional to have their community come together to fight for self-determination for their future.
They poisoned the food and logged the life out of the countryside. They had permits, the government, blind eyes, deaf ears, and empty hearts. They pushed and stomped like the people were nothing more than ants. What would you have done? What other options would you have? Would you run? Or would you sit and watch as your people fade into an unwritten history? Or would you join the ants who fought back? So I'm Johnny. I think you all know who I am by now. So I wanted to share with you all some of my experiences while I was in Tala Ingot. While I was in Tala Ingot, I got to meet some amazing, inspirational, funny Manobo folks. We got to share a lot of conversations. When I say conversations, I mean that there was a lot of translation. So we went from Manobo to Visaya, from Visaya to Tagalog, then Tagalog to English, and then again in reverse. So one of the most inspirational, or one of the really impactful conversations I had out of all the people that I met while I was there was with this young man right here. His name is Dr. Gibang. Some of you might have heard of him. Jay shared earlier that a Datu is sort of a community elder or community leader. It's someone that in the community they placed a lot of trust in that person's leadership. So the same thing goes with Dr. Gibang. The community really believes in his leadership, and they have a lot of trust in the decisions that he makes or in his guidance, right? So I had the opportunity to talk with Dr. Gibang, and I wanted to share with you all some of the things that he shared with me while I was sitting with him in that short period of time that we had to talk. So I lost my place. So as people have shared earlier in the presentation, life used to be really good for the Manobos. When they were hungry, there was wild fruits and vegetables growing everywhere. There was plenty of fish in the river. There was more chickens. There was a lot of chickens. There was a lot of chickens and pigs and just like different resources and food available to them. Like everywhere, it was pretty splendid, right? And then sometime in the late 80s, early 90s, things started to change. Specifically when was around the time when Alcantar & Sons, which is the large logging company, they started to take concessions of land in the area where the Manobo lived, right? So it started out with just two concessions, but only two, and the Manobo started to notice a change in their communities. So they couldn't just go to the river with a basket and hope to get fish. It was started to be more scarce. Jay mentioned that the medicine that they used to use was starting to disappear. The animals were leaving. So everything that they depended on for sustainability, for their livelihood, right? It was going away. And it was only like a small part of their land being occupied. But Alcantar & Sons, or Al Sons, they wanted more concessions. They wanted more land. They wanted to keep taking away from the Manobo people. So one of the things that the Manobo people noticed was that Alcantar & Sons, while they were logging, they were spraying chemicals everywhere. And the chemicals were not only just killing the plants, but they were making the animals sick. The animals that didn't leave, the animals were getting sick. And the people were getting sick too. They were getting dizzy. They weren't able to eat. So in response, the Manobo people went to the city to ask the government for help, right? But we also know that this is the same government that gave Alcantar & Sons the permits to take over the land in the indigenous areas of Mindanao. So several Manobo, they go into the cities to ask for help, and they know that the government is not going to help. They went to the local government, they even went to Congress and Senate, but the government kept giving more concessions to Al Sons. So one of the things that Al Sons wanted to do, they wanted to take all of the communities, which is over 100 communities, and place them in an area that was only the size of 2 communities. So imagine like 100 and something cities moving into like West LA, right? It's like a lot of people for a small area. And the Bonobos didn't want to do that, but according to the government and according to Al Sons, they didn't have any power to make that decision, that this is what they were going to be forced to do. And so another thing we have to consider is that much of what we mentioned already is that a lot of the culture and traditions of the Manobo people is tied to their land. So when you remove them from their land, you're removing them from their culture and their identity and their life, right? Their life, we say it all the time, land is life. So when we remove the Manobo from their land, we're removing them from their life. So So while this is all going on, Al Sons is trying to push the Manobo people further out into the forest so that they don't, so they can have the land and they can continue logging and whatever. So for about 3 years, the Manobo people continue to go to the city and ask the government to intervene, go to other community orgs and ask people to step in, right? Because they're basically, their lives are being taken away from them and they're just asking people for help. So this went on for about 3 years. And so it went on for about 3 years. And when the Manobo people realized that Al Sons wasn't going to give in, Datu Gibang, along with other community leaders and other Datus, they called a meeting of the indigenous community leaders, right, to discuss like, what are we going to do? Are we going to, let these people push us off of our land? Are we going to concede and go to this small area where it's only big enough for 2 communities? So what are we going to do? So Datu Gibang and several other community leaders, they got together, they met, and they decided that they were going to warn Al Sons that if they didn't leave, they were going to declare war on them. And so they warned Al Sons, and Al Sons responded by saying, you can start your war, we're going to hire armed forces. So Al Sons brought in different forces that they hired to defend their corporation in hopes that the Manobo would be scared and run away. But the Manobo didn't run away. So they declared Pangayao, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, or tribal war. And so one night in 1994, in the middle of the night, in the dead of night, the Manobo women and Manobo children left the communities to go to the city. And the next morning, after everyone had evacuated and went to the city to continually ask for support from people in the city. But the next morning when the sun came up, war ensued. So the community leader, the Datus, and the young men of the communities, they fought against Al Sons and their hired militia, right? But after all was said and done, the communities that fought actually won. So Al Sons retreated and gave up the fight, and the people that evacuated the indigenous areas were able to return to their homeland. But they didn't return and everything wasn't perfect, right? So they did return to their homeland, they returned to their communities, but they still face militarization constantly, and now they're being accused of being part of the NPA, against the government, and all these different things that they still have to face today. So, right, so the last 2 points I wanted to share were the Datus had to make a decision for their communities to whether or not they were going to run away and let this happen, or whether they were going to fight back. And if they didn't make that decision to fight back, they might not exist today. That's important to realize. If they would have just kept running, there might not be Manobo people with us today. And they're still there. They're still fighting. There's still a lot of things that they're working through. Some folks mentioned earlier about they're transitioning now from a hunter-gatherer society to a farming society because of what has happened has taken away their ability to go and find food the way they used to. So they're struggling and learning to grow crops, but they're doing it, they're learning. In my conversation with Datu Gibang, we were talking about the different crops that they had, which isn't much, things like rice, corn, kamote. And I naively asked him if he could have, what other crops would he want growing in the farms if he could get the seeds or whatever. And he sort of chuckled at me and was like, well, what good would it do to have new and different crops if my people are being militarized on their way to their farm and they're not being allowed to go to their farms?
"1994 was a victory of the people, but the ruling system now is the same as before. Still, the greedy want the land and their puppets advance with guns, lies, bribes, propaganda, money in their minds. But the Lumad's ancestors have long planted the seeds of resistance. Now the roots are strong, and the fruits are the children who know where they belong. From the mountains of Pantaron to Davao to Manila, they raise up their fists and shout, 'Yutang Kabilin, depensahan, panalipdan, defend our ancestral land. So, as Johnny have talked about, the resistance is very much alive in the history of the Talaingod Manobos especially, right? It's gone all the way from 1994 and everyone's saying that it's very different how the Talaingod Manobos are really holding it down for their communities. So, it was a big victory, but unfortunately we know that there are still companies out there, the system is the same, that's trying to get in and take their land from them. And I think one of the biggest things I learned from the Manobos is that resistance is not a one-time thing. You don't just win one campaign and that's it. Resistance involves really building the society that you want to see, especially in your communities. So after 1994, the Atamanobos realized that they cannot let any more companies come in because once one company comes in, the others are gonna have an easy entry, right? So that's when they realized that they needed to educate not just themselves, not just the leaders, but as well as their children, so that the children can continue the struggle that they have started.
Kaming mga lumad, mauna na ilugan mi sa yutang kabilin. Na adto mi kabukilan tungod sa kaning kapatagan. Gamay na ang gipakambyo sa pabaylo sa usa ka itarya, usa na ka tinapa. Usa pud kabilog ang tabako. Mauna ka na murag naning kamot ni ang natugibang sa edukasyon so para kamao mi sulat, kamao basa.
Importante gyud nga gikinahanglan sa mga tao diri, sa mga lumad nga hatagan sila og serbisyong panglawas, edukasyon, pagtuon kabahin sa ekonomiya, kanang pagtikad sa yuta ug unsaon pagpalambo sa tanom.
Importante sa ako ang pag-eskwela kay gusto nako nga na ako'y makatunan. Gusto pud nako nga kung nako'y makatunan makatudlo pud ko sa mga bata nga para nako nga manobo.
So that's a short clip of, can we have the lights on please? One of the datus, one of the literacy numeracy teacher who's also Lumad, who is from that community as well, and a student, as you can see. So I was able to go to the very first school that they actually built. So the first school was built back in 2003, and it was really interesting because I met this woman. Her name is Lorena. I don't know if you can see. So that's her. So she's a mother of 7, and 5 of them are small little girls. And she was telling me how they really worked hard for that school. They were the ones who asked for the school from organizations in the city to help them build school, to help them find the teachers. And they are the ones who really built the schools. They found the wood to build it. They provided everything so that they really can get a school. And then they also helped build the curriculum. Like they told the teachers what they really wanted to learn. So they wanted to focus on three different things, 3 main things: agriculture, health, and education. So throughout my trip, I can see that the emphasis in their education are things that are really needed by the community. So she was telling me that, yeah, we really worked hard for it because we don't want our children to end up like us because back then we were easily tricked. They can easily scare us off. The military can just scare us and then we agree to whatever they say. And so that's why they work hard for their schools. And then at the same time, she saw that it's also doing something to the community, that the community has become so much more stronger, they were more united. People are building stronger houses so their children can study all together and not in this super cramped room. The women and men were both working in the farms rather than compared to before when it was just the women who were doing most of the work. So even gender equality was improving because of the schools. And then it's really interesting because Lorena is also a community health worker. So they had doctors come in and train some community members so that people won't die because of small sicknesses that can easily be treated. Because over there, kids die because of UTI, even just basic flu or fever. They can die from malnutrition. So it's a big change to have a couple. I think they have around 5 women who are community workers in that community now. And then the next picture is actually one of her children, because it's really cool. She has these 7 children, right? So right now, one of them wants to be a teacher, one of them wants to be a doctor, one of them wants to be an agriculturist. So it's kind of like you can have a whole community already being led by her children. But it was so cool to talk to this little kid. She's super shy, but she was saying that she really wants to be a farmer when she grows up. She said that she wants everyone to have food. And when I was talking to her, she was already like, cleaning up the land and cutting up grasses. And her mom was telling me that sometimes she would just come home with a bag of bananas. And apparently she planted those bananas some time ago and they didn't know. And then she just came back and, oh, we have bananas for dinner, cool. So the children are really learning at the schools. And it's amazing to see how motivated the kids are in terms of learning. One of the teachers told me was that she really likes teaching math because the children love learning math because they learn how to count, they count the things around them, the chairs. And so she said that sometimes they would have quizzes because it's required to have quizzes at schools in the Philippines. They're accredited, so they have all these things they have to do for the requirements. So they would have quizzes, and sometimes the kids would fail. And of course, when we fail, we're like, oh man, I don't want to show it to anyone. You want to throw your test paper away. But these kids, they were all shouting like, Mom, can we have another quiz today? Can we do math the whole day? I was like, whoa, I could never imagine hearing that anywhere else. Because, you just don't want to do math anymore after having that. So that really shows they want to improve on the things, and they haven't lost that creativity because what they want to learn is coming from them. It's not something that's being enforced on them. Not like how it is now, unfortunately, in many of our schools, right? So it's pretty amazing how I feel like their system of education is actually pretty advanced compared to what we have in many places around the world, and compared to any school that I've been to. So another interesting thing is that it's really helping the conditions of women over there because there are some traditions that the women also don't like themselves. So there's the early marriage. A lot of children, a lot of young girls get married off at a very early age. Some of them get married off at age 9. So there's this one girl that I talked to, and she was about to get married. So some boy from another village, his family wanted him to marry her, and they were already giving the dowry, the cow or pig, whatever it is. And it's also hard for the girl's family to reject, apparently. It might cause shame in the boy's family, so that might cause them to wage a tribal war or like hold something against them. So they were really trying to find ways to not have her get married because they want her to finish school. So what they did was they sent her to the school where I went to, which is 9 hours away from their community. And the girl is now living with the teachers and helping out with the chores, babysitting, and she's going to graduate next year from grade school. And they said that it's also a process of talking to the community, telling the boy's parents that the girl wants to finish school first. So it's a slow change, but it's getting there. They keep working on it. So I have a lot of stories about the schools, but in short, the schools have become something that brings the community together. And more than that, it's like a symbol for the future that they want. It shows teaching the children how to plant more sustainably, how to plant vegetables, because they were used to hunting and gathering in the forests, but now they don't have that as much. So now they're starting to learn how to plant more vegetables, how to raise chickens and pigs. So it's really building their communities and strengthening their communities. So that's actually the reason why they are still under attack, unfortunately. And it shows so much where the government stands because these communities are getting stronger, they're being more sustainable for themselves, and yet they want to attack them because when they attack them, it makes the community, they think it makes the community weaker, the organizations weaker, right? So when the organization's weak, they're able to go in with all the mining companies, their development projects. So that's what they've been trying to do. They would do a lot of trickery. They would they would say that they're gonna build roads, but have the military build the roads. So for the Manobos, they're like, yes, we do want roads, so it's easier to get around. But then, why is it the military who's building roads? It should be the community organizations. It should be the civilians building the roads, not the military, right? So unfortunately, there's still a lot of militarization happening, and fortunately, I also know from meeting all these people, I know that the Manobos are not going to stop defending their land. They have nowhere else to go. They've been pushed back all the way back to the forests, and that's the last place that they're going to be able to stay. So they're going to defend that no matter what they have to do. So, okay, so recently they actually, after a series of attacks by the military on the community, they did a bakwet or evacuation again. That was only this January. It started February actually. So evacuation means they go down from their communities to Davao City. Now, most of us, when we hear about evacuations, we sometimes think about refugees, people being really scared of their situations. But these Manobos are really emphasizing that we didn't go down to Davao out of fear. We went down to Davao because we wanted to have our voices heard. We wanted to expose what the military is doing to our communities. So basically, they turned the evacuation, which we usually see as a sign of fear, into a way of showing their resistance and even in building solidarity. So every day in this camp, they would have a program over here. There's a big space here, and they would have different organizations come in. So one day it's the youth and students doing art or performing for the kids and sharing about their struggles. The next day it's workers and trade unions. So they would be sharing about the struggles of workers while the Manobos share about their struggles. Sometimes it's the peasants, so it changes every day. So this one is the Children's Rehabilitation Center actually, so they did a bunch of activities with the children. And then as part of that, they would also go to the offices of different government institutions. So they went to the National Commission on Indigenous People, they went to the office of the Peace Panel. So, and then of course they would go to the streets, right? They would march and really talk to the people around them, tell them what's happening. And how many people here heard of the 1 billion rising for revolution, the women thing, right? Where everyone goes out into the streets and dances. So they made their own dance for that. So they actually joined the OBR and they made their own dance to their own music. So here's a short clip again for that part. So we saw that woman waving, we call it itak or sundang, that big knife thing. She's actually quite a legend in the community. She was one of the people who fought with Dato Gibang against the 1994 logging company. So she's this super fierce warrior that, you can easily just go up to and talk to her, and she's really funny. So it's pretty amazing to see the resistance of the people, the spirit of a resistance, of a struggle, of not being scared. Like, you can see these people are people who are not scared. They're there to fight because they know that if they keep fighting, they might have to sacrifice some things. Doing the bakwet is a lot of sacrifice. They leave their farms behind. Some of the families get left behind. You leave your livelihoods behind, right? And it's a completely different place. Like, imagine, like, coming from the mountains where all you see is trees and grass and plants, and then you go down, you have roads and cars like speeding past you. So it's a big sacrifice for them. It's hard for them to go to the cities. Even the heat is really hard. So that's like they would go to whatever extent they have to in order to defend their land. So just to close it off, I want to talk about the last night I was there. They threw a despedida for me. So I think Filipinos know despedidas are like farewell parties. And they turned it into a cultural night. So people were singing, the kids put up this tiny play. It was really funny. They were coordinating while they were playing out the skits. But one of the Lumad leaders addressed the audience. So he wasn't even directly addressing me. But he was saying that, okay, he was telling them that it was very fortunate, they were very lucky to have people like me and everyone here to visit them from a completely different side of the world, that we will be able to share their stories, their dreams, their aspirations to the rest of the world, because they have no way of traveling across the world. So for them, it is a great challenge to strengthen their struggle, because they know that it's not only them who are struggling. They know that it's also the people all around the world who are being oppressed and exploited by foreign capitalists and US imperialists who are also struggling. There's so many people around the world who are struggling to be liberated from the claws of imperialism. He said that as a baon, do people here know what baon is? So in the Philippines, it's what you give your kids when they go to school, like it's lunch, or it's basically what you give someone when they have to leave, so they can carry it with them, they can feed themselves with it. So as baon, they wanted to give me, they wanted me to carry with me the strength of their struggle. They wanted me to carry the strength of how strong they hold on to their principle of defending their ancestral land. So I hope through this report back that you get inspired as well from their resistance, from their strength. As many of you go back to your communities and build solidarity, build your organizing, build the strength of the community. I hope that their stories also inspire you, and that we here together also recognize how our struggles are interconnected, and how we can all work together to doing the same thing that they're also doing, to building the society that we really want to see. So thank you. I'm going to call on my companions.
Endless curves of emerald mountain peaks, sounds of laughter running through tall, lush trees, where wildlife runs free, where rivers and slippery toes meet rocks, reflections of Lumad faces greet the sunlight, fresh stream water swimming with life, unity of the people and land, disrupted by monopoly and greed.
It is written on their faces, the anguish and fear. Yet they strive, yet they still sing, and their voices are loud. Proud and united they are fearless, under constant threat and constant attack. Their voices are silent whispers of the wind. Sleepless they stand together. They are the watchful eye, and in numbers they are heard.
They poisoned the food and logged the life out of the countryside. They had permits, the government, blind eyes, deaf ears, and empty hearts. They pushed and stomped as if the people were nothing more than ants. What would you have done? What other options would you have? Would you run? Would you sit and watch your people fade into an unwritten history? Or would you join the ants who fight back?
1994, the ants fought back, and it was a victory of the people. But the ruling system now is the same as it is before. Still, the greedy want the land, and their puppets advance with guns, lies, bribes, propaganda, with money in their minds. But the ancestors have long planted the seeds of resistance. Now the roots are strong, and the fruits are the children who know where they belong. From the mountains of Pantaron to Davao to Manila, they raise up their fists and shout, "Yutang Kabilin! Depensahan! Depensahan! Panalipdan! Pangiya! Pangiya!
to talk about some of the campaigns that we have, and it's a call to action. So, like I said, I was a part of the Kapit BC Kabataan Network, which was a network of students all over the U.S. who had the opportunity to help bring genuine relief to the Philippines. And this is actually an annual event. It's usually around a month or more. So if you have the opportunity to, please sign up. There are sign-up sheets in the back, info sheets on the KBKN mission if you guys would like to be a part of this year's mission. I believe they're already organizing to get people fundraised and raise money for their trips, and it will be an ongoing and a really awesome experience for you guys to be a part of that. So please, please join that.
Yes, so that's if you're youth. If you're non-youth, I'm just kidding. If you're like a doctor or a nurse and you want to provide any medical services, there's also the Panagyusa trip as well that you can participate in, which will be visiting Talaingod again this summer. This is our fifth year going to the exact same community. So we really have this really strong relationship built, and they would love to see more folks from Southern California in support of their struggle. So yeah, if you're interested, come talk to any of us. There's other folks here that are Panagyusa in the room. You want to raise your hand if you're part of Panagyusa? Woo! So talk to those folks, and we'll get you started. Other ways that you can really support is, right, this is one Reportback event. We can put on many. There's several of us in this room that have gone to Mindanao and that would love to share stories too, I'm sure. So if you want to do a forum or an educational report back or a discussion about issues going on in Mindanao, please invite us. We would love to do that at your school, your workplace, your community or nonprofit organization, church even, anywhere. We really just want to be able to spread these stories. It's not something that we did for ourselves to really just on an excursion, but we really want to make sure that the stories of these indigenous people and their struggle for land and life is really spread so that we can all partake in supporting that struggle. And you or your organization, school/church can also join the Panagyusa network. Here, based in Southern California, we meet once a month and we update ourselves about what's going on in Mindanao and how can we really support the struggle of the indigenous people there in their defense of their land. So, yep. Another way to support is this coming July from 16th to the 18th in Washington, D.C., there will be an International People's Tribunal. And so this is basically the people from the Philippines as well as people here in the United States and all over the world who are going to be publicly bringing Philippine President Aquino to trial. Basically to expose and condemn his human rights violation record. To this day, there have been hundreds of activists and human rights advocates who have disappeared or are in prison because of their political views and also for exposing President Aquino for his failure to the people. And so this International People's Tribunal in Washington, D.C., a lot of us in this room as part of Bayan USA, Bayan Southern California will be attending, but there will also be different international human rights lawyers. I believe Congress people will be there as observers. These are just the National Lawyers Guild will be there, and we're really trying to bring President Aquino to trial to have him be accountable for his gross human rights violations to the Filipino people, and that includes the indigenous Manobos. And so I don't know if folks picked up an envelope on your way in, but if you would like to, we are trying to fundraise to get people in the Philippines to really testify against President Aquino as far as how he's failed to address their basic needs. So this includes Typhoon Haiyan survivors to share their stories, and that also includes indigenous Manobo people from Talaingod. We really want to bring them here so they can share firsthand with the international community how has President Aquino failed their interests to really protect their indigenous lands. So we invite you to attend if you can, but we also, if you can't make it, we would like your support in trying to get folks from the Philippines to Washington, D.C. by July. So if you're interested or would like to donate, there's an option on your envelope there. And other ways to support. Do you want to talk about that?
Actually, maybe we can play another video for this part. Can you turn off the lights, please? So wait. I'll tell you when to turn off the lights. I see there's actually a lot of teachers over here or people who have been teachers? Can people raise their hands if they've taught in a classroom before or if they've been teachers? Well, clap your hands for those teachers. So one of the best things I saw there is meeting the teachers and even living with them and getting to talk to them. So I'm gonna show a short interview what I did with one of the teachers.
Yan, kaya tinitiis ko minsan, maiwan ako lang mag-isa. Di ko hinayaan na yung mga bata nasa labas lang, kahit hindi kaya, kahit na magkabinat ako, hindi kang aga, mula preschool hanggang grade 6, ina-accommodate ko sila lahat, kung ano na lang, kahit hindi na yun nasa lesson plan ko. Mas at least sa araw na ito, hindi na sayang, may natutunan kayo. Kahit na may hawak ako na bata, di na ako nakaayos na mabuti. Yung dapat grooming yung teacher daw papasok, di ba? Dapat teacher na teacher ka. Minsan hindi ko na naisip yun ba, wag lang masayang yung oras. Kasi yung pagiging guro ng mga katutubong manobo dito, mahirap na masaya. Pero hindi mo na sila iniba sa sayo, wala ng boundary. Sabi kasi nila, teacher may boundary with the students Yun sa baba, di ba? Dapat may boundary. Pero dito, tinanggal ko yung boundary. Dapat kami, iisa. Tsaka iisa yung layunin. Iisa din yung, ang papupuntahan. Sinamahan mo sila. Lalo na sa pakikipagbisa nila, sinamahan ko na rin. Yun yung naging papel ko bilang guro dito. Yun yung motivation ko sa sarili ko na, bali na yung allowance, bali na yung Ang importante, ito mga batang ito. Nabubuhay nga sila sa yun lang yung klase ng pamumuhay. Bakit di ko kakayanin?
So that was one of the most amazing people I met there. She's one of the teachers, and as you can see, she has so much passion in what she does, and she is really committed to doing that. She is practically giving her whole life to teaching these children, right? And for them, they really don't have a lot of things. They don't have books for every single child in the classroom. Sometimes children have to share notebooks. So there's an infinite need for resources, material resources for the schools. They're saying that every year about 3 schools are born in that area because there's hundreds of communities that still don't have schools. And they have an infinite need for more committed teachers. And there's no support from the government. All the support is coming from supporters, donations. It's really from the community. And the teachers are pretty much volunteer teachers and getting an allowance to provide for their families and their basic needs. So it's really, really important as well to give material support to them. If you have something extra, if you want to sacrifice a cup of coffee that you're gonna drink this week and just put it there in the envelope, it can go a long way. It can buy kids their books, their notebooks, tables. It can even build maybe a whole classroom for a new school in a whole community. It can provide maybe a sack of rice for 2 months for a teacher, right? So we really encourage everyone to give a little bit or more if you can. No matter every dollar can go a long, long way. And you can also pledge to do it monthly or annually. So there's a lot of ways you can contribute. But also the best way is to support them is to go there and see it for yourselves and show them your appreciation. So, what's next? So, we're gonna close up with a song. But
Are there any questions we can answer if folks had any questions come up throughout the presentation?
questions.
Any questions?
Wait, you go first before so I can remember my question better.
Hi. Are these schools free for all of the students?
It's 100% free. So they really don't have to pay anything. And then the high schools are actually boarding schools and everything, even food is provided. The Lumads don't really earn any cash, like very little cash, so.
So the reason why the government is not helping these people?
Because it's free?
No, I mean, like, why don't they support the education of these people? They're also Filipinos.
Yeah.
The practical
Mhm.
education, why can't they get something?
Yeah, actually, yeah. It doesn't make sense, right, that the government is not supporting these schools because these people have actually requested the government to provide schools for them and they didn't. Oh,
Is it because will these people vote?
do they vote?
Yeah.
I don't think they're even able to go down and vote
So
because
that's why they're not helping them.
because all they want is our votes, right?
Yeah.
And what they want when they're in power, pera.
Yeah, and also I think that when you look at a lot of IP populations, not even just in the Philippines, but all across the world, they aren't really associated with the system of government that, like the U.S. follows. Like if you look at the U.S. government, not a lot of Native Americans don't. They're forced to follow our system of government here in the U.S. and they have their own system of government, and so they fight for something called self-determination and right to their ancestral land because they feel like why should we have to follow somebody else and follow their rulings and their government when we have our own government. They came here and invaded our land, and so that's the struggle that's happening with their populations, which is why they're so agitated and they're organizing to change the conditions and the things that they're facing out there.
And I think just to add to the answer to the question, so yes, they don't vote. So that's one of the things that the government don't get anything from these people or from giving them any programs. And at the same time, the strength of the schools in organizing these communities are actually against the interests of the government now because they're stopping the development projects from coming in. They're stopping the mining companies from coming in, right? So the government doesn't like that as well. So they launch all these campaigns to try to close down the schools. So it really shows which side they're on, what stance they're taking, right? Are there any follow-up questions? Wait.
I was just kind of wondering what your thoughts on why a country so rich in natural resources would give those natural resources to another country when the people in that country are so poor.
Okay. I'll answer this question. I think that when you look at a lot of countries in Southeast Asia, you look at countries that are underdeveloped, countries that are looking for some kind of economic growth, and a lot of first world or developed nations take advantage of these countries. My country, I'm not Filipino, but I'm Cambodian, and my country is facing the same conditions or the same issues that a lot of the people in the Philippines are also facing. When you look at land grabbing, when you look at mining and logging corporations, you see that the government is interested in making money quick and making their GDP grow or the gross domestic product grow. It makes their country look better, and they try to find any way that they can to make sure that that happens. Whether it be exploiting indigenous populations, whether it be, destroying urban landscapes and pushing people out of the cities in order to make for tourist destinations and places that, bring in resources and bring in money. And so it's unfortunate, but it's happening, and the Philippine government, like a lot of other governments who are in underdeveloped nations, they take advantage of that, and it's just really a really sad thing.
I just wanted to add to that too, that the Philippine government is also, historically it's been a government that doesn't serve the interests of the Filipino people. It really serves the interests of multinational corporations, which is really U.S. corporations. And so it's really set up in a way, the Philippine government is really set up in a way where it will open up doors for these corporations, these U.S. imperialists, so that they can extract the natural resources, because the Philippines is rich in natural resources, but why are the people so poor? And the Philippine government is also responsible for a lack of labor laws and regulations. Corporations can set up factories in the Philippines and exploit Filipino workers, and so it's a two-way relationship with the Filipino government, also the U.S. government and the U.S. imperialists, and who is really benefiting is that wealthy small percentage of both. Actually, it's a global 1% that owns like owns a large population of all the wealth, while the remaining people in the world suffer. So, and the Philippines is rich in natural resources, so of course it wants to extend that and maintain that relationship. So that's my add. But did you have?
Yeah, I wanted to add to the question that the sister asked, and I mean, it's a good question and it makes sense. Why doesn't the government help, right? but I think that will go against the interest of the government, because what the government really wants, let's be honest, they want these people to just die or leave, right? They want them to disappear, because if the Manobo disappear from that part of the Philippines, then the companies can go in there and they have nobody to bother them. You know, so if they build schools for these communities, that builds more community, and that means they're not going to leave, right? That's the purpose. So that's why they understand the importance of the schools. And what I was going to say is that, like the brother said, it's happening all over the world. I don't know if you all saw this week in Australia, what the Australian government was doing to the indigenous people in Australia, where the people are fighting for the land of the Aboriginal people of Australia. It's the same thing, and I'm Mexican. And in Mexico, it's the same thing. The indigenous people, you saw how the 43 people in Mexico were kidnapped. Why? Because they're indigenous, and they're living in an oil-rich part of Mexico, and the government wants them to disappear. So it is an international thing, and I think for us here in the United States, it's really, really important for us to see the contradictions, because when you have terrible governments like Mexico, the Philippines, etc., the United States says nothing about the human rights violations of these countries. But when you have good governments, I would say people's governments like in Venezuela, where they actually use the resources of their country to benefit the poor people, the government in the United States calls them dictatorship and human rights violators. And I mean, it's so ridiculous, you know? Governments that truly are human rights violators like the Philippines and Mexico get an absolute free pass by the United States, because the United States is stealing their resources. But the governments that are actually doing good, they're the bad guy on CNN, you know? So that's the contradiction that we have to have an analysis about.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And I thank you, Ron, for that. Also too, right, is that we also have a voice here to really expose that contradiction. The US government is not gonna take a stand, so we really need to expose their stance. What is their relationship to the exploitation of people across the world and their natural resources and their labor? And how are they pushing off these indigenous people off their land? And I just wanted to add a last point about like how education and why that is really so important is when I was visiting Talaingod, the Datus there were telling us how before there was education in their communities, but before there was like people-led schools, they would sign off these papers that the government or the mining corporations would come in with and say like, oh, we're actually gonna give you more land, like why don't you sign this document? And then later they found out that they had actually just written off their land completely. And so now that they're equipped with knowledge and education, that's a form of resistance. And how can we support that form of resistance? That the education that we're supporting here from thousands of miles away is actually arming them with the tools to not only defend their land, but to build a new society where education is accessible and it is free. Like that's effing amazing. Free education, I've never heard of that. So, you know, and it's possible, We saw it, it exists. And we need to continue to support it and show that education is a human right and it is important and that it is a way for us to really liberate ourselves and the indigenous people. So. Alex had a last question, and then Ku, and then if anyone else, you can come talk to us. I think we're running out of time. Oh.
Yeah, I'm just curious. This isn't as deep of a question as the other ones, but where do they get their teachers from?
So there's a lot of sources. So it's a normal job listing there, but. They do background checks. If people have been part of people's organizations, have been active in the community, then usually it's like they prioritize people who have experience in doing more community work. But at the same time, because there's just so many schools popping up, like all the communities really want schools for their communities. So they also accept on-the-job trainings, basically internships for people who are studying teaching. And they're actually offering a very good program because in the Philippines, if you go to other public schools, you don't get any allowance, you don't get any salary if you're just doing an internship or on-the-job training. For them, they actually give them allowance, they give them food for when they stay there. And then before they go to these communities, they get training about the culture and methods of community-based teaching, community-based education, so all these things. So not all the teachers are as advanced or as committed. Some of them are there more for economic reasons, but usually it's teachers who are really committed who stay there for a long time. And we definitely need more teachers like that. And if anyone's interested to teach there, you are also welcome to. We have someone from the Bay Area actually just this Wednesday fly back to the Philippines to start teaching there. So, yep, it's open. No. So not right. I mean, preferably, but in a lot of the schools, they train you, and then they encourage you to through the process also get a teaching credential. But the what? You actually acquire it. Like I went there, I didn't know any Bisaya, I didn't know any Manobo. I knew Tagalog, which is a little bit of a help, but a lot of people actually don't speak Tagalog. So throughout the time, I mean, I was also pushing myself to learn, but I was able to get some basic language skills to manage to talk to people. And even our kasama from the Bay Area, he doesn't really know the language. He grew up here. So we'll see. Maybe we can ask him that question later.
Just one more question from Alex. I think I was reading there that they're trying to add grade levels. About how much needs to be fundraised to add another grade level to the school? Does anybody know?
I have that information, just not. Oh, cool. What have it?
It's about $4,000 to $5,000 to add another grade level for children, and they already are at the high school level. Many of us went to the high school last summer. So if anyone wants to have your school, your classroom, but another grade, it is possible.
Because that involves building the school, it involves building all the chairs, getting all the materials, finding a teacher, finding food for the teacher, all that stuff.
Okay, my question is because we all know the power of education, right? And I'm just wondering, is it possible, their school system, is it possible for a student to come from that school system and then study outside and go to university and come back? I don't know how this works, but basically my question is it an accredited school system that other countries
Well, yeah, maybe not necessarily other countries, because that's hard for any Filipino anyway to transfer to other countries. I went through that, but anyway, they can apply because the schools are also accredited. That's why they also need to teach English and all these things that they think are not really necessary for them, but they still learn it. So they're able to go to college outside. They actually have a scholarship program for them to learn education or agriculture. I think there's 49 scholars as of now that are going to the colleges in the cities. And there's a plan to build a college that would bridge them, so teaching agriculture and education so that they can go back to their communities and teach and develop their sustainable farming and agriculture. So it's pretty cool. And it's going to be free too, sorry.
You mentioned that the schools are accredited.
Mm-hmm.
Where are they getting that accreditation
From the government. So it was a struggle to get that accreditation. They went through the regional government to get accreditation. They don't want to accredit them, so they went all the way to national government, and they have to pass all these papers, blah blah blah, all the bureaucracy. But after I think 3 years or so, it was a couple of years, they were able to get accreditation. So, yep.
So currently in Talingo, there's 13 schools, unless they're added.
No. Oh, in Talaingon, yeah. But there's definitely more schools outside of Talaingon, in Compostela Valley, many other places in Mindanao. Any other questions?
Last one from Ku, unless others. Yeah.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to give a comment. I just wanted to appreciate you guys for going to the Philippines. You're not all Filipino. I am Filipino. I was born here in the United States. And the communities that you went to are not the communities that even Filipinos going back home for vacation are going to. You're going to the far-flung areas. It's very uncomfortable to get there. So as our Cambodian brother, Korean sister, Mexican brother, and he asked, it's your first time to go back home to the Philippines in a very long time. I think it's really important because that's unity right there. Even if you have no blood ties to the Philippines and you still are doing something to help the Filipino people by being in solidarity with them, like that means a lot to me. And that's the kind of unity or panagyosa that we need so that these children will graduate from college and continue to develop their communities and their nation and the whole country. So thank you for going to the Philippines and bringing back that baon of hope and inspiration of the people.
We're gonna sing now.
One last thing. So I'm gonna be putting up those videos online so you can also share them. And I think by the end of June I'll have a longer documentary putting all these things together. So maybe we'll have another showing, and I hope to see people there too. Yeah.
So while we're all gonna sing, and we have the lyrics up because we would like you all to join us in singing. You can't say that you don't know the lyrics because they're right there. So please join us in solidarity.
No, it's the left side in the parentheses is the translation, so you just sing this side.